joining us today.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you very much. So you have done quite a lot in your career so far. You've been
a long and winding road.
Telegraph, Guardian, writer, and now editor at Tortoise Media.
I'm one of the editor partners at Tortoise Media, and I have been since March. And no, it's a really exciting project to be a part of. I love startups. I think there's something very exciting about being part of a startup, and it is a very exciting time. Outside is an exciting time in the world to be writing about the world. So it's proving to be a really excellent journey. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the tortoise model because I think it fits really nicely in with what we're trying to do at More United as well.
So absolutely.
So we've got a time that we've never seen before in politics today. And both old parties and traditional media are playing out those sort of old tropes and those old lines. So how is Tortoise Media trying to sort of turn that on its head? Do you want to just talk through sort of what's different?
Well, I mean, there are lots of aspects to Tortoise that are new. So let's just take a few of them. I mean, one of them is that our co-founders, James Harding and Katie Vannick-Smith, James, former editor of the Times and director of news at the BBC, Katie Vannick-Smith, former president of the Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones. Very, very experienced media background. And I think what they both sensed was that, if you like, the digital cacophony, the fact that everyone was being bombarded with news, meant that there was an extent to which people were kind of only getting the surface. They were getting too much. And that was a bad match with the kind of huge forces at work in the world at the moment. And the concept of slow journalism that they've adopted here, and we is part of our kind of project at Tortoise, is that, and I guess it is the basis of its name, is that we print the news when it's ready to print, and we aren't rushed along and hurried by the daily diary. And what we're constantly looking for is what are the really deep underpinning forces here? What's the real story? What are the things that are going to affect the future? Why are all these things that are apparently unexpected and are shocking
Where did that come from?
Where did it come from? Because, as you say, the regular, if you like, the regular software of political and policy analysis isn't working. So that's part of it. Another big part of it is that I think we've seen a massive decline of trust in the media. And not just the media, I mean, institutions generally.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that's key to Tortoise is the idea that it's not an old-fashioned subscriber service you get with other magazines. It's a membership organisation. And it's crucial to us that our members are here, come into our what we call our ThinkIns, which are the events we hold to model a sort of editorial conference, except an open source editorial conference. People can come in and take part in the debates and actually contribute. And more than that, what comes out of those debates is like an old-fashioned editorial conference to this extent that we do go off and make use of the things that people have suggested to us. So our journalism is intimately connected with what our members tell us they're interested in, what their lived experience is. So that's a sort of, that I think is symbolic of a broader commitment to raising trust again in news media, which has become, I think, a really serious civic problem. Because if you want a democracy that works well, it has to be well informed. But to be well informed, you need sources that are not just authoritative, but regarded as authoritative. So that's sort of very much part of what we do.
Absolutely, because as a reader and consumer of news, you have to, and you always should. I remember my father always saying to me, never trust one source. You should always look at several sources of news. But when they become so polarised, the news today, and I think that just reflects our wider society. It's the very reason More United was formed, as you know, back in 2016, because we saw at a point where politics had become so tribal. And actually what was happening in the country was largely being ignored with the grab for power. So our model works, because people often say to me, so why have you done a partnership, which we'll talk about in a second, with Tortoise? And I said, because actually what they're trying to do in media, we're trying to do in politics.
Yeah, definitely.
And the start of that is, we get people with open values to run as candidates. We support them with money, we support them with volunteers, and we endorse them, but we ask them to commit to cross-party working. And that for us is, you were talking about sort of like that, how do we get people to trust again? And that is our proxy for trust. You know, if you're willing to work across party, it says something about you that you will put, you know, your country above the rosette that you wear.
Yeah.
So, and once those fabulous people are elected, they then join our network, and then when we campaign on a few different things, and we'll tease out some of that later, because we've done some really interesting things with Tortoise already on mental health. And you know, we're facing an election coming up in the next few weeks, and we really want to go as big as possible with this. So we've got just under 60 MPs in our network at the moment, and we're aiming to have 200 in the next one. But I think that also, you know, having those people in Parliament's not enough. We need to engage people as well. So what I wanted to talk to you now was more about, you touched on the ThinkIns, and I love these. I think I probably spoke about...
No, you've been a great star of the ThinkIns.
No, but they're so nice, because, you know, we all get to go on panels,
yes,
and we get to go on TV and radio, and you stand there, and it's very much you broadcast at people.
Yes, very much so. And then there's a polite 10 minutes at the end in which the mic goes around, and you know, the audience are invited to chip in.
Absolutely.
I have a much greater interest, actually, journalistically, in the interaction and participatory model, because yes, it's great. I mean, you do need experts such as yourself at a ThinkIn, but what you want to hear is what the people who've come along think about what's been said and what they have to say, and so and I think that in itself, again, is a micro model for building up trust.
It really is, because I know we had a ThinkIn here on Monday that was looking at who's in charge of our democracy. We had some really interesting people speaking. Fiona Hill, former Chief of Staff to Theresa May.
Yep.
And it was really interesting because she actually said one of her most rewarding moments when she was in government, because she had many that weren't quite so rewarding, but was actually working cross-party.
I think that's absolutely right. You know, I think it's the polarization we're seeing in politics is not because human nature has changed.
No.
I don't think people have suddenly become more bigoted or more inclined to be at the poles of politics. I think it's simply that the forces working upon the structures of politics, and in particular digitalisation, has had some very unexpected consequences. And you know, one of them, to just take one example, is that I think when the internet became as big a force as we all knew it would eventually, there was an expectation that it would be a unifying force.
Yeah.
Actually, it's the algorithmic nature of the internet has been to drive people into silos and into tribes. And so if you're interested in public policy and politics, at the moment, as things stand, you are constantly dealing with the fact that people are being driven by their handheld devices, their iPads, their news feeds, their social media, towards opinion that they like already. Yeah. And that's had a huge effect, I think, upon the sort of texture of public debate. But the footnote to that, or more than the footnote, is I really don't think that we're living in a world in which human beings are getting worse. The nature of human beings has become more kind of polarized by some sort of strange combination of factors. And so I remain quite optimistic, but I think you have to, in order to change that, you can't expect things just to go back to where they were before. You have to actually have organisations like More United which take action.
And you also have to listen to those people.
Yeah.
You know, we can't just, you know, we were just talking before that, you know, we had the referendum, and it was very easy to label, the press did this, label 52% of the nation as racists and xenophobes, and you know, I don't believe that. I do not believe that at all. And for the good of the country, I truly believe that's not true.
No, I think that's right, and I think that, you know, the idea that, as it were, the nation is now neatly divided between bigots on the one hand and intransigent liberal elitists on the other is a total mischaracterization of a really subtle gradation of opinion. Now, of course, on both sides, you know, I'm sure there are lots of Remainers who voted because they have a sort of snobbish belief that being part of the EU somehow part of, you know, Britain's imperial entitlement.
Yes.
And then I'm sure there are, there will be Brexiteers who are bigoted, probably. But I suspect the vast majority of people who voted in the referendum in 2016 did so out of a quite a confused mix of emotions. And characterising them as two tribes is very dangerous.
It is. It really is, and one of the things that we talk about at More United and we've been really focused on is actually addressing all of those issues that have been ignored because Parliament and government have been wrapped up in all of these.
Absolutely.
And one of them is our creaking mental health system.
Absolutely.
We've got such a poorly resourced mental health system in the UK that the NHS takes a lot of the burden.
It does.
We were just talking earlier that people are going to very extreme lengths to try and get treatment. They almost have to get worse before they get better.
You get these terrifying and tragic cases of people who are doing things themselves that are sufficient to get them into ER so that they can get processed into the system. Yeah. And this is clearly not a satisfactory place for a supposedly civilised 21st century country to be in.
It's really not.
But I think that mental health in all sorts of ways is now, an urgency question.
Yeah.
It's been very good to see the way that it's been destigmatised over the last 20 years. People now feel a lot more confident about talking to their colleagues, their family, their friends about it, and that's fantastic. But that's only the first phase.
Yes.
The next phase is to bring into being an infrastructure that can respond to that.
Yeah. And this is one of the subjects that our MP network wanted to campaign on. And we're preparing for when the next government is elected to really make sure that this is on the political agenda. So we approached you guys at Tortoise and said that mental health was something we wanted to engage people across the country in, and we thought there was a way our partnership could do that. Because the way our partnership works is that we open up the Tortoise concept to our membership, because we're a membership organisation, and vice versa, so that we can get those voices across the country involved. And the first event that you pulled together for us was so impressive. You managed to get, I think it was 30 different organisations from the mental health sector in one room, and this was a closed session because there was very sensitive things being discussed. And now we've had our first on the road session, and I think we've got another 4 planned across the country. So let's just talk about that a bit further and some of the
Well, I think that the thinking model is incredibly well suited to this. It has both a certain informality, but also an invitation to people to not ask questions, because questions are, prohibited sounds a bit strong, but we don't ask. We
strongly encourage not to.
Exactly. The idea is people make contributions, and in the case of mental health debates, it's almost like sharing. They're sharing an experience, and this can be enormously powerful, but enormously instructive as well, because you're suddenly hearing the lived experience of people who have been in the system. So you get out of the kind of seminar room Westminster model where people talk about white papers and policies, and all that's important, but you go back to absolute basics, which is how has this affected real lives? And you often discover, all too often, that the real experiences are very grim. Now, our focus at Tortoise is going to be in the immediate future on mental health of the young, because this is clearly a crisis point for all sorts of reasons, and there's a lot of speculation about it in the papers all the time. Some of it informed, some of it less informed. Obviously social media plays a part, but often it's implied that if you disinvented the smartphone, all this wouldn't be happening. I don't think it's as simple as that.
No.
Debates about medication, its application, the different forms of therapy. There's a whole series of debates to be had, but the most important one is undoubtedly about how difficult it is to get people into the system. Young people are spending months, and in some dreadful cases years, waiting to get basic treatment.
To change people's lives.
Absolutely.
It's the individual and friends and family as well. And I think this is sort of the thing that I sort of believe so strongly in the more united model, because there is no one party that should own this subject.
Completely.
It is a basic human right to have treatment, to make sure you're living your life to the best.
Yes.
So this is why we want to make sure that we elect as many brilliant people in the next election, because we want to be able to make sure that those are not put on the back burner again. We often see, let's invest in our infrastructure, let's do all these things, and they're not bad things to do per se, but are we actually addressing the things that are going to change the individual in Hull, in Stockport, in Cornwall, these different places, or are we just sort of doing the same old things again and again and again? So there's tons and tons of subjects that we could debate and talk about, and most importantly do something about and get people's feedback. But the next big ThinkIns series is around civil rights.
We've got actually a day of ThinkIns, and which More United,
we are,
to our delight, will be heavily involved. And it's kind of really trying to grapple with the issue of civil rights in the 21st century, because we've done a lot about identity politics, and we've touched on the question of the written constitution, and it occurred to us that really they mesh. There's a lot of debate now going on in all sorts of areas, ranging from Me Too to representative democracy to LGBTQ rights to data rights, and they all have in common this sense that the forces of change at work are so great that the time has come for us to look at these things in the round. Yeah. And I think having an event a day of ThinkIns rather than just things that are separated has a merit. We don't do it very often, but when we do it, it's when it's something that we think requires a greater intensity of examination, and I'm really excited about it, because I think there are going to be some terrific speakers and a real sense of I think of urgency. I wouldn't want to use the word crisis, but I think it is a moment where we need to look at these things together and accept that some of the old language is really outdated, and we're going to have to develop a new language. And I've felt that very strongly, particularly since Me Too, that this is a kind of a time to look at democracy in the round and ask why are certain things not working, but also how exciting it is there are all these new movements like your own springing up. What does this mean? I think it means that the future is bright, but I think the future is only bright if you make it bright. Yeah,
the future's bright, but we have to work hard to get there.
It only comes about by agency.
It really does.
There is absolutely no pendulum that swings back automatically.
And we do also see with a lot of these movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, we've also seen a backlash as well.
Absolutely.
Because when you start to challenge people's power base, they have had their way for a very long time. They don't like that.
No.
So it's also, it's very easily, the Me Too, you can't say anything to a woman these days, etc. So it'd be really interesting to tease those things through.
I think that the silliest phrase that I read in the papers at the moment is the post-Me Too era, as if Me Too was a sort of, it was like a kind of fashion season, and now it's part. I mean, Me Too, I think, is a decades-long project.
Absolutely.
It will be with us for the foreseeable future, and it's in a way, and it's in its infancy, which is another reason why I think it's important to talk about it. But I absolutely agree with you. I think it's no accident, for example, that in America there's now such a concerted anti-abortion movement.
Absolutely.
That is clearly related to the Me Too movement and a response to it.
It is keeping people back in the boxes. This is who you are. This is what you do. And for many, hundreds of years, we've done that as humans. That this is who you are and what you're expected to do. Don't step outside of that and keep the status quo. And I think there's a real feeling that's not right. And where's that got us to as well? Yes. If you look at that from a political sense, having the same old people ruling us, the same old people getting into Parliament, they don't represent the country. And this is not just about where you've been educated; it's about life experiences. I'm really looking forward to it. So, what date is it on?
October the 12th.
So, I encourage everyone to come along to it.
It's on Eventbrite. Go to the website. You'll find it very easy to.
Fantastic.
To find, and hope everyone will come.
And hopefully hear lots of different opinions.
Absolutely,
as well.
We want a range of opinions. This is not it's not a campaigning day. It's a day to hear people offer their views on a whole range of subjects.
Yeah, and it will be at the moment ahead of a general election.
Yes,
unless something changes.
I think pretty inevitably ahead of an election. But that election is coming. It's coming down the road.
That election is coming, so it'd be very interesting for me to be able to sort of take a temperature for what people are feeling, because that is, if I was standing as a candidate, that is what you need to be thinking about as if you're going into government. That's
what you want. We want candidates in the next election when it comes, which I think will be before Christmas. Yeah. To be going into the election thinking not just about Brexit and its consequences, as important as those are, but a whole range of subjects, and also crucially thinking under the sort of more united heading about ways they can collaborate, because the next Parliament must be one that does stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
This Parliament has not done stuff.
Yeah.
And it's time for a Parliament that actually gets things done and responds to what people really need done and the change that this country requires.
So if you've loved Tortoise as much as we do, you can get a free membership. If in the description, if you click on the website and then enter the code TORTOISEUTD, you will get a year's membership for free.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was fun.
So what do you've got a